The carriage door swung open just as the first crack of thunder split the sky, and Brielle Bennett threw herself inside without thinking, rain-soaked and gasping. She slammed the door behind her and collapsed against the plush velvet seat, her chest heaving as water dripped from her hair onto the floor. The storm had come out of nowhere, transforming the Chicago streets into a torrential nightmare in minutes. She'd been running from the gallery opening, her heels abandoned 2 blocks back, her dress clinging to her skin. When she'd seen the ornate black carriage waiting at the curb, impossibly old-fashioned but blessedly dry, she hadn't hesitated. It wasn't until her breathing slowed that she realized she wasn't alone. A man sat across from her in the shadows, perfectly still. The dim interior made it hard to see his features clearly, but she could make out pale skin, almost luminescent in the darkness, and hair so white it seemed to glow. He wore an immaculate black suit that looked like it cost more than her yearly rent, and he was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I'm so sorry," Brielle stammered, already reaching for the door handle. I didn't realize anyone was—" "Stay!" The single word cut through the air like a blade. Not loud, not harsh, but absolute, commanding. The kind of voice that expected obedience and had never been denied. Brielle froze, her hand hovering over the handle. Outside, lightning illuminated the street, followed immediately by thunder that shook the carriage. The rain hammered against the roof like bullets. "You'll drown out there," the man continued, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't quite place European, old world, aristocratic. "The storm will not pass for hours." She should leave. Every instinct screamed at her to leave. But when she looked at the window, at the sheets of rain obscuring everything beyond, she hesitated. She was already soaked to the bone, and she had no idea where she was. She'd run blindly, panic overriding sense, and now she was lost somewhere in the Gold Coast, with no phone, no shoes, and no way home. "I'll just wait until it eases up a bit," she heard herself say, settling back into the seat but staying as far from him as possible. "Thank you. I promise I won't be long. Take all the time you need." As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she could see him more clearly. He was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unnatural. Sharp, aristocratic features that could have been carved from marble, high cheekbones, a mouth that was both sensual and cruel. His eyes were the most unsettling thing about him. Pale silver, almost colorless, and they never blinked as they studied her. "I'm Brielle," she offered, because the silence felt too heavy. "Vaelrith." He tilted his head slightly, like a predator considering its prey. "Vaelrith Draculesti. That's quite a name. It's quite old." Something about the way he said it made her shiver, not from the cold, though her wet dress was certainly contributing, but from something deeper. Primal recognition, perhaps. The hindbrain identifying danger. "You're shivering," Vaelrith observed. Before she could protest, he shrugged out of his coat and held it toward her. "Take it. I'll ruin it. I'm soaking wet. I have others." She wanted to refuse, but another tremor ran through her body, and pride seemed less important than warmth. She accepted the coat and wrapped it around herself. It was impossibly warm, as if it had been sitting by a fire, and it smelled of something rich and foreign spices and old books and something metallic she couldn't identify. "What were you running from?" Vaelrith asked. The question caught her off guard. "How did you know I was running?" People who simply seek shelter don't throw themselves into strangers' carriages with quite so much desperation. They knock first. They apologize profusely. They certainly don't look over their shoulders the way you did before climbing in. He leaned forward slightly, and the dim light caught his face. "So I ask again, what were you running from?" Brielle's hand unconsciously went to her throat, where bruises were forming beneath her wet hair. She saw his eyes follow the movement, saw something flash in those silver depths, something hot and dangerous. "A man from the gallery," she admitted quietly. "Marcus Holbrook. He's a collector, very wealthy, very connected. He's been persistent. Tonight he followed me out, cornered me in an alley, and she swallowed hard. "I need him and ran, but he has friends everywhere, and I just kept running and running. And then the storm came and I saw your carriage, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have burdened you with this." "His full name," Vaelrith interrupted, his voice like frost. "Marcus Holbrook. Where can he be found?" "What?" "No, I shouldn't have said anything. I'll deal with it. I'll file a report, or where can he be found?" The repeated question wasn't louder, but it carried such weight that Brielle found herself answering. He lives in a penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, building with the green glass facade, but please don't. I don't want any trouble. I shouldn't have involved you. Vaelrith sat back, and though his expression remained calm, there was something in his stillness that reminded her of a cobra before it struck. You are under my protection now. This Marcus Holbrook will learn the consequences of putting his hands on what is mine. I'm not yours, Brielle said, but her voice came out weaker than intended. No, Vaelrith agreed, his eyes boring into hers. Not yet. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the carriage, a different kind of electricity crackled. Who are you? Brielle whispered. Really? Vaelrith smiled, and for the first time she saw his teeth perfectly white, perfectly sharp, canines just a fraction too long to be normal. I think you already know. She did. Somehow, impossibly, she did. Every horror movie, every fantasy novel, every legend whispered in the dark, they all pointed to the same impossible conclusion. But impossible things didn't exist. Monsters weren't real. Vampires were fiction, entertainment, gothic romance, and nothing more. Show me your neck, Vaelrith said softly. What? The bruises. Show me properly. She should refuse. She should throw open the door and run back into the storm, because sitting in a confined space with something that might be a vampire was the height of stupidity. Instead, she found herself pulling her wet hair aside, exposing her throat to him. Vaelrith moved with speed that seemed to blur the air. One moment, he was sitting across from her. The next, he was beside her, his cold fingers gently tilting her chin up. He examined the bruises with clinical precision, his touch surprisingly gentle despite the obvious strength in his hands. 4 fingers and a thumb, he murmured, right-handed. He grabbed from behind and squeezed. His finger traced the worst of the bruising, and his eyes had gone from silver to something that glowed faintly red. He tried to cut off your air supply. This was not merely harassment. This was attempted assault. Attempted murder, perhaps. It wasn't that serious. Don't minimize what was done to you. His voice dropped to something almost resembling a growl. Men like Marcus Holbrook escalate. Tonight he cornered you. Tomorrow or next week or next month he would have done far worse. But there will be no tomorrow for his attentions. I will ensure it. Brielle met his eyes, saw the predatory certainty there, and felt something shift inside her. She should be afraid. She should be horrified. Instead, she felt safe, protected. For the first time in months of dodging Marcus's increasingly aggressive advances, someone believed her. Someone was angry on her behalf. Someone wanted to help. You're really a vampire, she said. Not a question. I am. The Vampire King, if your last name is any indication. His expression shifted to something that might have been approval. You're educated. Yes. I am Vaelrith Draculesht, King of the North American Covenant, Lord of Chicago, and first of my line. And you, Brielle Bennett, have stumbled into my carriage, claimed my protection, and caught my interest all within the span of 10 minutes. Quite an achievement. I should be screaming. You should be, he agreed. But you're not. Why? She considered the question seriously. Because you haven't hurt me. Because you could have easily the moment I climbed in here. Because you gave me your coat and you're angry about my bruises and you... She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the strange certainty she felt. You feel safe, which is insane because you're a vampire, but it's true. Insane, Vaelrith repeated, something like amusement flickering across his features. Perhaps. Or perhaps you simply recognize what your instincts already know, that you are safer with me than you have been in months, that I will let no harm come to you, that you are, as of this moment, under my protection and my care. Why? Brielle asked. Why would you care about some random human who climbed into your carriage? Vaelrith was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes searching her face. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost contemplative. I have lived for 8 centuries. In that time I have seen countless humans. I have walked among them, ruled them, fed from them, loved them, and lost them. And in 800 years I have learned to recognize something rare when I see it. He reached out and tucked a wet strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly tender. "You are rare, Brielle Bennett. Your courage, your fire, the way you look at me without true fear, even when you know what I am. Rare enough that when you crashed into my world seeking shelter, I found I did not want to let you leave." "That's insane," she whispered. "You said that already." "It bears repeating." He smiled again, a real smile this time, and it transformed his face from beautiful to breathtaking. "Perhaps. But I am the Vampire King, and I have earned the right to be insane when I choose." The carriage lurched suddenly, beginning to move. Brielle grabbed the edge of the seat to steady herself. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere dry, somewhere warm, somewhere you can rest without fear." Vaelrith settled back into his seat across from her, but his eyes never left her face. "My home. I promise you will be safe there. I should go to my own apartment." "Does Marcus Holbrook know where you live?" The question hit like ice water. She'd given him her business card once, weeks ago, before she'd understood what kind of man he was. It had her gallery address, but also her personal email, and with enough money and connections. "He might be able to find out," she admitted. "Then you will not go there tonight. Perhaps not for several nights until I have resolved the situation." Vaelrith's tone left no room for argument. "You will stay with me, where my protection is absolute. I don't even know you. You know I'm a vampire. You know I'm a king. You know I have promised you safety. What else do you need to know? How about whether you're going to drink my blood and kill me?" "I will never take your blood without your permission," Vaelrith said, his voice taking on a formal quality, as if making an oath. "I will never harm you. I will never allow harm to come to you, and I will never, ever let you die. On my honor as king, and on my name as Draculest, I swear it." The weight of the words settled over her like a physical thing. In 8 centuries, she suspected, Vaelrith Draculest had not given his word lightly, and somehow, impossibly, she believed him. "Okay," Brielle said. "Okay, I'll stay tonight. But tomorrow we talk about this properly, about what this means, about what happens next, about all of it." "Agreed." The carriage rolled through the storm-dark streets, and Brielle watched the city pass by through rain-streaked windows. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape. Instead, she found herself stealing glances at the Vampire King across from her, memorizing the sharp lines of his face, the elegant way he held himself, the strange comfort she felt in his presence. Whatever had started when she climbed into the wrong carriage to escape the storm, she had a feeling her life would never be the same. And somehow, that thought didn't frighten her nearly as much as it should. The carriage pulled up to a building that Brielle immediately recognized, one of the most exclusive residential towers in Chicago, all black glass and architectural intimidation. The doorman who opened the carriage door didn't bat an eye at the antique vehicle or at Brielle's bedraggled state. He simply bowed deeply to Vaelrith and held an umbrella over them as they made their way inside. The lobby was empty at this hour, all polished marble and subtle gold accents. Vaelrith guided her to a private elevator with a hand at the small of her back, his touch burning through the wet fabric of her dress. The elevator required a key, which he produced from his pocket, and then they were ascending smoothly. "Penthouse?" Brielle guessed. "The top 3 floors, actually. I require space." "For what exactly?" "Court business, entertaining dignitaries, my library, the occasional ballroom dance." He said it so seriously that she couldn't tell if he was joking. "And privacy. I value my privacy greatly." The elevator opened directly into an apartment that redefined luxury. Soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the storm-lashed city. Furniture that was clearly antique and probably worth more than her entire life savings. Everything was done in blacks and deep reds and golds, creating an atmosphere of old-world opulence. "This is..." Brielle struggled for words. "This is incredible." "This is home." Vaelrith shrugged out of his suit jacket. She still wore his coat and rolled up his sleeves with efficient movements. "Come, you need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." He led her through the sprawling apartment to a bedroom that was larger than her entire studio. The bed was a massive 4-poster affair that looked like it belonged in a castle, all dark wood and crimson silk. Through an open door, she could see a bathroom that featured a tub the size of a small swimming pool. "I'll have my housekeeper bring clothing," Vaelrith said. "In the meantime, feel free to bathe, to rest, to make yourself comfortable. I'll be in the study if you need anything. Down the hall, third door on the left." He turned to leave, but Brielle caught his arm. "Wait." Vaelrith looked down at where her hand touched his sleeve, then back up at her face. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping me, for all of this. I know I crashed into your life uninvited, but you've been incredibly kind." "Kind," he repeated, as if testing the word. "I've been called many things in my centuries, Brielle. Ruthless, powerful, terrifying, but rarely kind." His hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his arm. "Perhaps you bring it out in me." Then he was gone, moving with that supernatural speed, and she was alone in a vampire king's bedroom, wondering what alternate reality she'd stumbled into. The bath helped. Brielle sank into water that was perfectly hot, let it soak away the cold and fear and confusion, and tried to process everything that had happened. Vampires were real. She'd met the vampire king, no less. He'd promised to protect her and brought her to his home and looked at her like she was something precious and rare. It was insane. All of it was completely, utterly insane. And yet she found herself smiling as she washed her hair with shampoo that smelled like night-blooming flowers and cost probably $50 a bottle. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that was softer than clouds, she found clothing laid out on the bed. Not the expected t-shirt and sweatpants, but a dress, a beautiful midnight blue silk thing that looked like it had been made for her. With it was delicate underwear, still tagged in exactly her size. The precision was slightly unsettling, but she dressed anyway. The silk felt like water against her skin, and when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The dress made her look elegant, expensive, like she belonged in this world of vampires and kings. She found Vaelrith in the study as promised. He was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. Something Eastern European, harsh and beautiful at once. When he saw her, he said something curt into the phone and ended the call. "The dress fits," he observed. "How did you know my size?" "I'm 800 years old. I've learned to be observant." He gestured to a chair near the fireplace. She hadn't even noticed the fire, but it was crackling merrily, driving away the last of her chill. "Sit. We should talk." Brielle sat, and Vaelrith took the chair opposite her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. In the firelight, his pale skin seemed to glow, and his white hair caught the light like moonlight on snow. He was inhumanly beautiful, and the weight of his regard made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "Ask your questions," Vaelrith said. "I can see them burning in your eyes." "Are there many of you?" "Vampires, I mean." "More than humans know, fewer than we once were. We live in the shadows by choice and necessity. Humanity outnumbers us dramatically, and while we are stronger and faster and longer lived, you have numbers and daylight on your side. So we have learned to coexist quietly." "Do you kill people?" "I have killed many people over my long life," Vaelrith said bluntly, "in wars, in feuds, in self-defense, and yes, occasionally when feeding when I was young and less controlled. But I do not kill now unless absolutely necessary. We have learned better methods, blood banks, willing donors, careful feeding that leaves no lasting harm. The old ways were wasteful and dangerous." "Do you have to kill to survive?" "No, we need blood, but not death. A vampire can feed from a human without harming them, if they have sufficient control." His eyes held hers. "I have perfect control." The implication in his words made her pulse quicken. "And the sun? Crosses? Garlic?" "The sun will burn us to ash in minutes. Crosses and holy water are superstition, meaningless. Garlic is simply unpleasant, but so it is for most people." He smiled slightly. "We can cross running water, enter homes without invitation, though it's considered terribly rude, and mirrors reflect us perfectly well." "How old are you really?" "I was born in 1226 in the Carpathian Mountains. I was made vampire in 1251, at 25 years old. So I've been vampire for 775 years and alive for 800. The numbers were staggering. "You've seen everything. The Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, world wars. I have seen empires rise and fall. I've watched humanity drag itself from darkness into light and sometimes back into darkness again. I have loved and lost more times than I care to count." His voice softened. "And yet somehow, meeting you tonight feels more significant than most of those 8 centuries combined." "You can't possibly mean that." "Can I?" Vaelrith leaned forward, his silver eyes intense. "I told you in the carriage I recognize rare when I see it. In 800 years, I have met perhaps 3 humans who have made me feel the way you do right now." "And what way is that?" "Alive," he said simply. "Truly alive, not simply undead. Interested, intrigued, possessive, protective. When I saw those bruises on your neck, I wanted to tear apart the man who put them there with my bare hands. When you put on that dress, I wanted to keep you in this apartment forever so no one else could see how breathtaking you are. These are not feelings I have often, Brielle. They are dangerous feelings, consuming feelings, and yet I find I don't care." Brielle's heart was hammering in her chest. "This is crazy. We just met. You can't feel this way about someone you just met." "Why not? I've had centuries to understand myself, to know my own mind. When I meet someone extraordinary, I know it immediately. I don't need weeks or months to recognize something real." He stood and moved to crouch before her chair, bringing them eye to eye. "Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me you don't sense this connection between us, this pull. Tell me, and I'll back away. I'll give you space. I'll be nothing more than your protector until the threat is handled and you're safe again." She should tell him exactly that. She should maintain distance, sanity, rational thought. Instead, she reached out and touched his face, let her fingers trace the sharp line of his jaw, felt the coolness of his skin. "I feel it," she whispered. "I don't understand it, but I feel it." Vaelrith's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they were glowing faintly red. "Then let me court you properly. By vampire standards, by human standards, by any standards you wish. Let me show you my world. Let me protect you and care for you and win your heart the way you've already begun to capture mine." "This is insane," Brielle said for the 3rd time that night. "Yes," Vaelrith agreed, "but sometimes the best things are." She laughed, and the sound seemed to surprise them both. Then, because she was apparently in the business of making insane decisions tonight, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was meant to be brief, testing, a simple press of lips. But the moment their mouths met, something ignited. Vaelrith made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, his hand coming up to cup the back of her head. He was cold where she was warm, but somehow that made the contrast even more electric. He kissed like he'd had 800 years to perfect the art, and perhaps he had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she more than him, Vaelrith pressed his forehead against hers. "You are going to be the death of me," he murmured. "I thought you were already dead." "Undead? There's a difference." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "And you make me feel more alive than I have in centuries." A phone buzzed, harsh and intrusive. Vaelrith growled, actually growled, and pulled out his cell. He read the message and his expression darkened. "What is it?" Brielle asked. "Marcus Holbrook has filed a police report claiming you assaulted him unprovoked and stole from him. He's claiming his mother's necklace is missing a piece worth $50,000, apparently." Vaelrith's voice was ice. "He's having you framed." Brielle felt the blood drain from her face. "I didn't take anything. I just ran." "I know. But he has money and connections, and he's decided to make you pay for rejecting him." Vaelrith stood, and there was something truly terrifying in his expression. Now something that reminded her exactly what he was. "This ends tonight." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to pay Marcus Holbrook a visit. I'm going to ensure he withdraws his complaint, leaves you alone, and understands exactly what happens to those who threaten what is mine." He looked down at her. "Stay here. You'll be safe. My security is extensive and includes several trusted vampires who will die before letting harm reach you." "You're going to kill him." It wasn't a question. "No," Vaelrith said. "I'm going to terrify him. There's a difference. Death would be too quick, too easy. He needs to understand fear the way he made you understand it. He needs to feel powerless, and he needs to know that you are forever beyond his reach." Before Brielle could protest, he was moving toward the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back. I will return before dawn. Rest. Eat, there's food in the kitchen, prepared daily by my housekeeper. And Brielle? Yes? Don't leave, please. I could command it, use vampire powers to compel you to stay, but I won't. I ask you as someone who cares for you. Stay where you're safe until I return. Then he was gone, moving with that impossible speed, and Brielle was alone in a vampire's penthouse, wondering what she'd set in motion. She should call someone. Her sister, maybe, or her friend Jessica. But what would she say? That she'd stumbled into a vampire's carriage and he'd claimed her, and now he was off to terrorize her stalker. They'd think she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. Instead, she explored the apartment. It was even larger than she'd initially realized, 3 floors connected by a sweeping staircase, each more impressive than the last. The library was floor-to-ceiling books, many of them clearly ancient, in languages she couldn't read. The ballroom was real, a massive space with hardwood floors and crystal chandeliers that probably hosted vampire court events. There was an art gallery featuring pieces she recognized from various museums, and some she didn't, probably private commissions worth fortunes. In what appeared to be Vaelrith's private study, she found papers spread across a massive desk. She knew she shouldn't look, but curiosity won out. The documents were business reports, financial statements, legal documents. She'd known Vaelrith was wealthy, the penthouse alone proved that, but the numbers she was seeing suggested wealth on a scale that was almost incomprehensible. He owns most of Chicago, a voice said behind her. Brielle spun around. A woman stood in the doorway, pale-skinned, white-haired, silver-eyed, another vampire. She was dressed in an elegant pantsuit and wore her centuries with casual confidence. I'm Seraphine, the woman said. Vaelrith's second. I manage his businesses and occasionally his more impulsive decisions. Her smile was wry. You would be the latter. I'm not. You are, Seraphine interrupted. Within an hour of meeting you, our king has committed to protecting you, brought you to his private residence, and gone off to confront a wealthy human who dared to harm you. This is not normal behavior for Vaelrith, who is usually the most controlled and strategic of rulers. So yes, you are absolutely one of his impulsive decisions. Brielle didn't know what to say to that. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Didn't you? Seraphine moved into the room with that same predatory grace they all seemed to share. You climbed into his carriage. You accepted his protection. You wore the dress he provided and kissed him. Yes, I have sources. You have woven yourself into his life very quickly, Brielle Bennett. Are you angry? Curious, Seraphine corrected. Vaelrith has been alone for a very long time. He takes lovers occasionally, feeds when necessary, but he hasn't truly cared for anyone in over a century. The last woman who captured his attention. She paused. It ended badly. So I'm curious whether you're the beginning of something beautiful or another tragedy waiting to happen. I don't want to hurt him. Then don't. Seraphine's silver eyes were sharp. Vampires love deeply and forever. If Vaelrith has decided you're his, he will move heaven and earth to keep you. He will reshape his entire existence around you. And if you break his heart, he will carry that wound for centuries. So I'm asking you now, are you serious about this, or are you just caught up in the drama and danger and romance of it all? It was a fair question. Brielle thought about the terror of running through the rain, the relief of finding shelter, the impossibility of everything that had happened since. She thought about Vaelrith's eyes, the way he looked at her like she mattered, the certainty in his voice when he promised protection. I don't know, she said honestly. This is all completely insane. Yesterday I was a normal gallery assistant with a stalker problem. Today I'm in a vampire king's penthouse contemplating, what? A relationship with someone who's been alive for 8 centuries? It's absurd. Yes, Seraphine agreed. But that's not what I asked. I asked if you're serious. Brielle met the vampire's eyes. I'm serious about finding out if this could be real. I'm serious about giving it a chance. I'm serious about not running away just because it's scary and different and impossible. Is that enough? Seraphine studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. It's a start. Come. I'll make tea and tell you embarrassing stories about our king. If you're going to be part of his life, you should know what you're getting into. Over tea, and yes, apparently some vampires drank tea, Seraphine told her about Vaelrith's history. How he'd been born to a noble family, turned by a vampire lord who saw potential in him and had spent his first century as a vampire learning control and power. How he'd eventually overthrown that same lord who'd made him, claiming territory and establishing the North American Covenant. How he ruled with intelligence and strategy rather than brutality, earning respect from other vampire leaders. "He's not perfect," Seraphine said. "He can be arrogant, commanding, possessive to a fault. He expects obedience and doesn't handle defiance well. But he's also honorable in his own way. Once he gives his loyalty, it's absolute. Once he makes a promise, he keeps it. And once he loves—" She trailed off meaningfully. "What happened to the last woman?" Brielle asked quietly. "She was human. A historian he met in 1902. They had 10 beautiful years together." Seraphine's expression was sad. "Then she got sick pneumonia. In those days, before antibiotics, it was often fatal. Vaelrith offered to turn her to make her vampire so they could have eternity. She refused, said she wanted to live her natural life and die her natural death. He respected her wishes, but it destroyed something in him. He watched her die, and afterward," she shook her head, "he was different, harder, more closed off. Until tonight, apparently." Brielle felt tears prick her eyes. "That's heartbreaking. It's reality. Human-vampire relationships always end in loss one way or another. Either the human dies and the vampire mourns for centuries, or the human becomes vampire and loses their mortality. There's no easy answer." "But you think I should try anyway?" "I think you've already decided to try," Seraphine said. "And I think Vaelrith needs this, needs you, needs to remember what it feels like to care for someone. Whether it ends in joy or heartbreak, at least it will end in feeling something real." They talked for another hour, and Brielle found herself liking Seraphine despite the vampire's blunt manner. She was protective of Vaelrith, but fair-minded, willing to give Brielle a chance. Dawn was approaching. She could see the sky beginning to lighten through the windows when Vaelrith returned. He looked exactly as he had when he left, not a hair out of place, but there was satisfaction in his eyes. "It's handled," he said without preamble. "Marcus Holbrook has withdrawn his complaint, issued a public apology, and pledged never to contact you again. He's also donated a significant sum to the women's shelter downtown and will be attending court-mandated therapy." "How did you manage all that?" Brielle asked. Vaelrith's smile was sharp. "I can be very persuasive when I choose. Let's just say Mr. Holbrook now understands that there are things in this world far more terrifying than losing money or reputation. He won't trouble you again." "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me for protecting what's mine." He moved to stand before her, reaching out to tilt her chin up. "How are you? Did Seraphine treat you well?" "She made tea and told me about your tragic lost love from 1902. Vaelrith shot a look at Seraphine, who smiled innocently. She asked. I answered. "Traitor," he muttered, but there was affection in his voice. To Brielle, he said, "Catherine was a long time ago, a different life. Do you still love her?" "I will always carry love for her," Vaelrith said honestly. "She was important to me, and her loss shaped me. But she is gone, and I have mourned. And now there is you. This is not about replacing her. It's about moving forward, about finding something new and beautiful in this long, long life of mine." "I need to sleep," Brielle said, because the weight of everything was catching up with her. "I know it's almost dawn, but I'm human and exhausted and overwhelmed." "Of course." Vaelrith gestured toward the stairs. "The bedroom is yours. I'll be down the hall if you need me, though I'll be dormant during daylight hours. Seraphine will remain. She's older and can withstand limited sunlight. If you need anything, ask her." Brielle nodded and headed for the stairs. At the last moment, she turned back. "Vaelrith?" "Yes?" "I'm glad I climbed into your carriage." His smile was like sunrise. "So am I, my dear. So am I." She slept deeply and dreamlessly, waking in the late afternoon to find someone had left food on the nightstand: fresh fruit, cheese, bread, and sparkling water. She ate, showered again in that magnificent bathroom, and found more clothing laid out. Jeans this time, soft and perfectly fitted, and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. When she ventured out, she found Vaelrith in the library, reading a book that looked older than America. He glanced up as she entered, and his expression softened. "You look rested." I feel almost normal again, Brielle admitted, though normal is relative at this point. Indeed. He set down the book and stood. I thought tonight I might show you something of my world, if you're interested. What did you have in mind? There's a gathering tonight. Vampire court, though a minor session, just local covenant business. I thought you might like to see what my life actually entails. And he hesitated, which seemed unlike him. I would like to introduce you, as mine, under my protection. It would make your position clear to all vampires in Chicago and beyond. You mean mark me as off-limits. Crudely put, but accurate. It would also honor you. To be claimed by a king is no small thing in our world. Brielle thought about it. She could stay hidden in this penthouse, safe but ignorant, or she could step into his world properly, see what she was potentially getting herself into. The choice seemed obvious. Okay, she said. Show me your world. Vaelrith's smile was brilliant. Then we'll need to dress appropriately. Vampire court has standards. The dress he provided for the evening was stunning deep crimson silk that hugged her curves and fell in elegant folds to the floor. With it came jewelry that looked antique and expensive, a ruby necklace and matching earrings that caught the light like drops of blood. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw someone transformed. Not Brielle Bennett, gallery assistant and aspiring artist. Someone else. Someone who belonged in a vampire king's world. Vaelrith wore a formal suit that made him look even more regal than usual, all sharp lines and perfect tailoring. When he saw her, something flared in his silver eyes. You are breathtaking, he said softly. You will outshine everyone there. That seems unlikely at a vampire gathering. Trust me, he offered his arm. Shall we? The gathering was held in an underground space beneath one of Chicago's oldest buildings. They descended through levels of increasing luxury until they reached a massive hall that looked like it belonged in a Gothic cathedral. High vaulted ceilings, elaborate carvings, candles everywhere casting flickering shadows, and vampires, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all pale-skinned and white-haired and inhumanly beautiful. They all turned when Vaelrith entered, and the room fell silent. My people, Vaelrith said, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. I present to you Brielle Bennett, who has claimed my protection and my regard. She is to be treated with the respect due to my consort. Her safety is my safety. Her honor is my honor. Any who threaten her threaten me. Is this understood? A murmur of assent rippled through the crowd. Brielle felt the weight of hundreds of predatory eyes on her and had to fight not to shrink against Vaelrith's side. Good, Vaelrith continued. Now, let us proceed with tonight's business. The court session was fascinating and surreal. Vampires brought disputes and requests before their king, who listened with careful attention and rendered judgments that seemed fair and strategic. Brielle saw the ruler in him then, not just the man who'd protected her, but the king who'd held power for centuries through intelligence and strength. During a break-in proceedings, several vampires approached to meet her. They were uniformly polite but curious, studying her like she was an interesting puzzle. How did you meet our king? One asked a female vampire with kind eyes. I climbed into his carriage during a storm, Brielle said, and realized how absurd it sounded. Fate, another vampire said approvingly. The old stories speak of such meetings. Is it true you're human? A younger-looking vampire asked. Very human, Brielle confirmed. And you're not afraid? She considered the question. I was at first. Now, no, should I be? Most humans would be terrified in a room full of predators, the young vampire said, but you stand here calmly. Either you're very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both, Brielle said lightly. They laughed, and she felt some of the tension ease. These were people, undead people, but people nonetheless with personalities and humor and curiosity. Not monsters, despite the fangs and the superhuman grace. Vaelrith found her later as the gathering was winding down. You've made a good impression. Several of my court are quite taken with you. They're not what I expected. What did you expect? Gothic villains and tragic romantics? Something like that, he smiled. We're simply people who've lived longer than most. We have the same hopes and fears and desires as anyone. We just have to drink blood and avoid sunlight. When you put it like that, it sounds almost normal. Nothing about our world is normal, Vaelrith said. but perhaps that's what makes it interesting. They returned to the penthouse in the early hours of morning, and Vaelrith walked her to her bedroom door. The night felt heavy with unspoken things, with potential and possibility. "Thank you for tonight," Brielle said, "for showing me your world, for introducing me to your people. It means a lot. Thank you for standing beside me with courage and grace. You honored me tonight." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "May I kiss you goodnight?" Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and kissed him first. This kiss was slower than their first, deeper, full of growing feeling and tentative trust. When they parted, Vaelrith's eyes were glowing faintly red. "You are dangerous, Brielle Bennett," he murmured. "Good," she said. "You should be the one off balance for once." His laugh was rich and genuine. "Good night, my dear. Sleep well." Days passed into weeks, and Brielle found herself settling into a routine she never could have imagined. She spent her days exploring Vaelrith's apartment, which felt increasingly like home, working on her art in the studio he'd set up for her, and video chatting with her concerned sister, who thought she was staying with a friend after the Marcus incident. She spent her evenings with Vaelrith, talking and laughing and learning about his long, long life. He courted her properly, as promised. He took her to vampire-run restaurants where she was the only human, and the food was exquisite. He showed her his favorite places in Chicago, the ones that had meaning across centuries. He told her stories of his past, some triumphant and some tragic, painting a picture of a life beyond her imagining. And slowly, carefully, they grew closer. It was 3 weeks after the storm when Brielle realized she'd fallen in love with him. They were in the library, her reading a novel while he worked through correspondence, and she looked up to find him watching her with such tender affection that her heart squeezed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Everything. You've become essential to me, Brielle. These weeks with you have been—" He paused, searching for words. "I haven't been this happy in over a century." "I love you," she said, because suddenly she couldn't not say it. "I know it's fast and probably crazy and definitely complicated, but I love you." Vaelrith moved with that impossible speed, crossing the room in a blink to pull her into his arms. "I love you," he said fiercely. "I have loved you since you climbed into my carriage looking like a drowned cat and refused to be afraid of me. I have loved you through every moment since. I will love you for the rest of your life and beyond it." They kissed, and this time it didn't stop at kissing. They made their way to his bedroom larger than hers, dominated by a bed that could sleep 5, and he laid her down on silk sheets like she was something precious. He made love to her with 8 centuries of experience and genuine feeling, and she discovered that vampires might be cold-skinned, but they burned hot when they wanted to. Afterward, lying tangled together, Brielle traced the lines of his face. "What happens now? What do you want to happen?" "I don't know. I can't hide in your penthouse forever. I have a life, a job, family who will eventually want to see me in person." "Then don't hide," Vaelrith said. "Go back to your life, but come back to me at night. Let me be part of your world as you've become part of mine. We'll figure out the logistics." "And eventually?" she asked quietly. "Eventually I'll age and you won't. Eventually I'll die and you'll go on." "Eventually," Vaelrith agreed, his expression shadowed. "But not for decades yet. We have time, Brielle, years and years of time to love each other before we need to face that choice." "What choice?" "Whether you want to stay human or become like me." He said it carefully, watching her reaction. "I would never force it on you. Catherine chose mortality, and I honored that. But I would offer you immortality if you wanted it, the chance to be together forever, not just for your lifetime." Brielle's mind reeled. She'd thought about it abstractly, of course she had. Dating a vampire meant considering impossible things, but hearing him say it made it real. "I don't know if I could do that. Give up sunlight, survive on blood, watch everyone I know die." "I know. It's not an easy choice. It's perhaps the hardest choice anyone could make." Vaelrith pulled her closer. "But it's years away from being necessary. For now, let's just be together. Let's be happy. The future will come whether we worry about it or not." So that's what they did. Brielle returned to her apartment after Vaelrith had his security people sweep it thoroughly and install new locks and cameras. She went back to work at the gallery, where her boss welcomed her return and didn't ask too many questions about her absence. She reconnected with friends and family. though she kept Vaelrith's existence private for now. How did you explain dating a vampire king to people who didn't believe in vampires? But every evening, she returned to the penthouse, to Vaelrith, to the life they were building together. They had been together for 2 months when the challenge came. Brielle was at the penthouse, cooking dinner while Vaelrith handled court business in his study, when Seraphine burst in with unusual urgency. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Alexander Volkov has arrived in Chicago." Vaelrith's expression went cold. "Explain." "He's claiming you violated the North-South Treaty by attacking a human under his protection. He's calling for a formal challenge to your kingship." "Who?" Vaelrith demanded. "Marcus Holbrook, apparently. Holbrook has some distant business connection to Volkov's territory, and Volkov is using that as excuse to challenge you. It's a power play. He's been looking for an opening to contest your rule for decades." Brielle felt ice in her stomach. "This is because of me, because you protected me from Marcus. This is because Alexander Volkov is ambitious and ruthless and has been waiting for any excuse," Vaelrith corrected. "Marcus Holbrook is simply the excuse he chose." "What happens in a challenge?" Brielle asked. Vaelrith and Seraphine exchanged glances. "Single combat," Vaelrith said finally. "To the death. Winner takes territory, title, and all that comes with it." "You mean you have to fight him? Actually fight?" "Yes." "Can't you negotiate? Talk it through? Isn't there some kind of vampire court system?" "There is, but Volkov has invoked the ancient laws. Once a challenge is formally issued, it must be answered. To refuse would be to forfeit everything." Vaelrith's voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I will fight him. I will win, and this will be resolved." "You don't know that you'll win. I've been alive for 8 centuries. Volkov is barely 4. I'm stronger, faster, and far more experienced. But not invincible," Brielle said, her voice rising. "You could lose. You could die." "I won't." "You can't promise that." Vaelrith crossed to her in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms. "Listen to me. I have fought countless battles in 8 centuries. I have survived wars and revolutions and the rise and fall of empires. I will survive this. I will win. And when it's done, Volkov will be ash and you will still be mine, and we will continue our life together. I promise you." Brielle wanted to believe him. She buried her face in his chest and tried not to think about a world without him in it. "When?" 3 nights from now. The challenge will take place at the Court of Judgment beneath the city. All Covenant vampires will attend to witness. "Can I be there?" "Absolutely not," Vaelrith said immediately. "It's too dangerous. Volkov plays dirty and his people are ruthless. I won't risk you." "But no," his voice was absolute. "You will stay here protected by my most trusted guards, and you will wait for me to return victorious. This is not negotiable, Brielle." She wanted to argue, but she could see the fear beneath his confidence, not fear for himself, but for her. So she nodded against his chest and held him tighter. The next 3 days were tense. Vaelrith spent his time preparing, training, strategizing with Seraphine and his other advisors. Brielle tried to stay out of the way, but she couldn't focus on anything. She pushed food around her plate, stared at blank canvases, and watched the clock tick closer to the moment when Vaelrith would fight for his life. The night of the challenge, he came to her before leaving. He wore all black, simple and elegant, and his silver eyes were determined. "I will come back to you," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "I swear it on everything I am. I will come back." "You better," Brielle said, trying to smile through the tears. "Because I love you, and I have plans for our future, and they require you alive. Well, undead. Whatever." He kissed her, deep and fierce and full of promise. Then he was gone, and she was left in the penthouse with 2 vampire guards who looked sympathetic but immovable. The hours crawled by. Brielle paced, unable to sit still, imagining every terrible possibility. Vampires were strong and fast and deadly. A fight between 2 powerful vampires could be devastating. Vaelrith said he'd win, but what if he was wrong? What if Volkov had some advantage, some trick? What if she never saw him again? It was close to dawn when Seraphine appeared, her expression grim. "What happened?" Brielle demanded. "Is he alive?" "He's alive," Seraphine said, "and victorious, but there were complications." What complications? Volkov's second tried to interfere in the fight. Several other vampires got involved. It became a brawl rather than an honorable duel. Vaelrith won, but he's injured. Badly. Brielle's heart stopped. How badly? Bad enough that he needs to rest and heal. He's at the Court of Judgment still. It's a secure location and underground, safe from sunlight. He's asking for you. Then take me to him. Seraphine looked uncomfortable. It's vampire territory, ancient halls where humans rarely go. Are you sure? Take me to him, Brielle repeated with steel in her voice. Now. They descended into the earth beneath Chicago, deeper than Brielle had ever gone. The Court of Judgment was ancient, all stone and shadow and flickering torchlight. Vampires watched as Seraphine led her through, their silver eyes tracking her movement with unnerving intensity. Vaelrith was in a side chamber, laid out on a stone bench that served as a bed. His clothing was torn and bloody, and there were wounds across his chest and arms that looked devastating. But his eyes opened when she entered, and he smiled weakly. You came. Of course I came, you idiot. She knelt beside him, taking his hand carefully. Seraphine said you won. I did. Volkov is dead. His followers have submitted or fled. My rule is uncontested. He winced as he shifted position, but he fought dirty. Silver blade, which burns and slows healing. I'll recover, but it will take time. How much time? Days, maybe a week? His thumb stroked over her knuckles. I'm sorry. This wasn't how I wanted tonight to go. You're alive, that's what matters. Brielle felt tears sliding down her face. When Seraphine said you were injured, I thought, I know. He pulled her down carefully until her head rested on his shoulder. I know, but I kept my promise. I came back to you. They stayed like that as dawn approached, and Brielle felt the moment when Vaelrith fell into the daylight torpor. His body went still, his breathing nearly stopping, and for a terrifying moment she thought he'd died. But Seraphine assured her this was normal, that he was simply dormant until sunset. You should rest, Seraphine said gently. There are rooms here where you can sleep. He'll want to see you when he wakes. So Brielle slept in the ancient halls beneath Chicago, surrounded by vampires and history and the weight of 8 centuries. And when Vaelrith woke that evening, she was there, holding his hand and ready to help him heal. Recovery took 5 days. Vaelrith's supernatural healing worked quickly, but silver poisoning slowed the process. Brielle stayed with him the entire time, sleeping during the day and keeping vigil at night, bringing him blood and conversation and comfort. On the 6th day, he was strong enough to return to the penthouse. Brielle helped him into the apartment, and he collapsed on the sofa with a sigh of relief. Home, he said. Finally. You scared me, Brielle said, sitting beside him. When I saw those injuries, I thought I'd lost you. It takes more than that to kill me. I'm absurdly difficult to kill, actually. But his voice was serious when he continued. But yes, it was closer than I'd like, and it made me think about something. What? The future. Our future. Vaelrith took her hand. I told you we had time, years before you'd need to make the choice about becoming vampire. But seeing how easily I could have died, how easily you could have been left alone, I realized time isn't guaranteed, even for immortals. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to marry you. Human fashion, vampire fashion, any fashion you want. I want to bind myself to you officially and completely. His silver eyes were intense. And I'm saying that if you ever decide you want immortality, I will give it to you. Not now, not until you're ready, but someday. So we can have forever instead of just decades. Brielle's heart was racing. You want to marry me? Desperately. I love you, Brielle Bennett. I want you to be my wife, my consort, my partner in all things. Say yes. She should think about it, should consider the implications, should be rational and careful and sane. Instead, she kissed him and said, yes, yes to marriage, and yes to forever when I'm ready. Yes to all of it. His smile was brilliant. Then we'll start planning immediately. A wedding worthy of a queen, because that's what you'll be, my queen, in all ways that matter. They married 3 months later in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. Brielle wore white silk, and Vaelrith wore formal black, and they exchanged vows before humans and vampires alike. Her sister cried. even though she still didn't know the full truth about Vaelrith's nature. His court witnessed with approval, seeing their king happy for the first time in living memory. The reception was held in the ballroom of the penthouse, and it was beautiful and surreal and perfect. Brielle danced with her new husband beneath crystal chandeliers and felt like she was living in a fairy tale, albeit one with fangs and blood and immortal politics. Happy, Vaelrith murmured as they swayed together. Ridiculously happy, Brielle confirmed. How did I get here? How did I end up married to the vampire king? You climbed into the wrong carriage to escape the storm, he said, smiling. And I said, stay. And you did. And here we are. Here we are, she echoed. Years passed. Brielle lived her human life by day and her vampire life by night, straddling both worlds with increasing ease. She continued her art, eventually having shows in galleries across the country. She maintained relationships with family and friends, though she had to carefully manage what they knew about her husband's nature. And slowly, as time passed, she began to notice things. The way her reflection showed lines appearing at the corners of her eyes, the way her energy wasn't quite what it used to be, the way Vaelrith looked exactly as he had the day they met, unchanging and eternal. It was 5 years into their marriage when she brought it up. I'm ready, she said one evening as they sat together watching the city lights. To become like you, to choose forever. Vaelrith turned to her, his expression careful. Are you certain? There's no going back once it's done. I'm certain. I've had 5 years to think about it. I've lived my human life, accomplished my human goals, made my peace with mortality. Now I want immortality. I want centuries with you. I want forever. It will hurt, he warned. The transformation is agonizing, and after, you'll have to learn to control new instincts, new hungers. It's not easy. Nothing worth having is easy, Brielle said. I want this, Vaelrith. I want to be your wife, not just for my lifetime, but for all time. I want to stand beside you as your equal, not your fragile human spouse. I want this. He searched her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I will give it to you. But we'll do it right with preparation, with support, with everything you need to make the transition as smooth as possible. The transformation was planned carefully. Seraphine helped Brielle understand what to expect. Other vampires who'd chosen to turn shared their experiences. They picked a date, cleared her schedule, made arrangements with her family, told them she was going abroad for several months, which was close enough to the truth. The night came, and Brielle was ready. Vaelrith laid her down in their bed, kissed her tenderly, and spoke the ritual words that had been passed down through vampire generations. Then he bit her, deep and true, and drank. Pain exploded through her body, not from the bite, his venom numbed that, but from what came after. Her body dying, her heart slowing, every cell transforming from human to something other. She screamed, and Vaelrith held her through it, whispering words of comfort and love. It felt like dying, it felt like burning, it felt like being torn apart and remade. And then, after hours or days or eternities, it was over. Brielle opened her eyes and saw the world transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer. She could hear Vaelrith's breathing, the blood moving through his undead veins, the heartbeat of the human doorman 40 floors below. She could smell everything, the city, the night, the life pulsing all around. And when she looked at Vaelrith, she saw him truly for the first time, not just beautiful, but radiant, powerful, hers. How do you feel? He asked softly. She flexed her hands, feeling strength she'd never possessed, sat up easily, no longer weak or dizzy, smiled and felt fangs sharp against her lip. I feel alive, she said, laughing at the irony. More alive than I ever did as human. Is that strange? No, Vaelrith said, his smile matching hers. That's exactly right. Welcome to eternity, my love. Welcome to forever. Learning to be a vampire took time. Brielle had to master her new strength so she didn't accidentally break things, had to learn to feed without killing, to take only what was needed, had to adjust to sleeping during the day and living at night, had to accept that she would never see the sun again. But Vaelrith was with her through all of it, patient and supportive and loving. Seraphine helped, along with other court vampires who remembered their own transformations. And gradually, Brielle found her footing in this new existence. She was surprised by what she didn't miss. sunlight. Yes, she mourned that loss, but most things remained the same. She could still create art, still love her husband, still laugh and think and feel. She was still herself, just more. 20 years after the storm that had changed everything, Brielle stood in the penthouse looking out over Chicago. Beside her, Vaelrith wrapped an arm around her waist. "Any regrets?" he asked. She thought about it seriously. About becoming vampire? "Sometimes I miss the sun. Miss being able to eat normal food without it tasting like ashes. Miss knowing I'd have grown old naturally." She turned to face him. "But then I think about how I'd have died by now, how I'd have left you alone again, how we'd have missed out on these 20 years and all the years to come. And no regrets. This was the right choice." "I'm glad," Vaelrith said softly, "because you've made these centuries more beautiful than all that came before. You've taught me to live again, not just exist. You've given me joy I'd forgotten was possible." "We gave that to each other," Brielle corrected. "I climbed into your carriage seeking shelter. You gave me a home. I was running from danger. You gave me safety. I was alone. You gave me love. We built this together." "We did," he agreed, "and we'll continue building it, for centuries, for as long as we both shall live, which, given that we're immortal, is rather a long time." She laughed and kissed him, her vampire king, her husband, her forever. Outside, Chicago glittered with lights and life. Inside, two immortals held each other and celebrated the life they'd chosen, the love they'd found, the eternity they'd share. It had started with a storm and a wrong carriage and a single word: stay. It had become everything. The years continued to unfold like pages in an endless book. Brielle found her place not just as Vaelrith's wife, but as a leader in her own right. She became known in vampire society for her compassion and her ability to bridge the gap between human and vampire worlds. She advocated for ethical feeding practices, for protecting humans rather than preying on them, for modernizing vampire culture while honoring its traditions. Vaelrith watched her with pride and love, seeing in her the perfect partner he'd waited centuries to find. Together, they ruled the North American covenant with wisdom and strength. They traveled the world, meeting other vampire leaders, forging alliances, occasionally defending their territory from challengers, though none as serious as Volkov had been. They made friends who would last centuries. They created art and music and beauty. They witnessed human history unfolding and sometimes gently influenced it for the better. They fed the hungry, protected the vulnerable, and used their immortality and resources to make the world incrementally better. And through it all, they loved each other with the intensity and depth that only immortals could achieve. Every night was precious, even when there were infinite nights ahead. Every kiss mattered, even when there would be endless kisses to come. They never took each other for granted, never let their love grow stale or routine. 50 years after the storm, on the anniversary of the night they met, Vaelrith took Brielle to the exact street corner where his carriage had been parked. It was different now. The city had changed. Buildings had risen and fallen, but the corner remained. 50 years, Brielle said, looking at the spot where she'd thrown herself into his life. Half a century since I made the best impulsive decision of my existence. The storm is still my favorite weather, Vaelrith said, and they both laughed because he'd said it so many times before. Because storms brought you to me. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd kept running? If I'd never climbed into your carriage? Every day, he said seriously. Every single day I'm grateful you didn't. That fate or chance or destiny brought you to me. That you were brave enough to stay when I asked. That you gave us a chance. We've built something beautiful, Brielle said. A marriage, a kingdom, a life that spans centuries, and we're just getting started. Just getting started, Vaelrith agreed. He pulled her close, and they stood there on the street corner where it all began, two vampires in love, two immortals who'd found each other against all odds. Rain began to fall, a light drizzle, nothing like the storm from 5 decades ago, but enough to make them both smile at the poetry of it. Stay, Vaelrith said, echoing that first night. Always, Brielle replied, kissing him in the rain. Forever and always, and they did stay. Together. Forever. The storm had passed long ago, but what it had brought them, love, partnership, eternity would never fade. They had found in each other what every being, human or vampire, mortal or immortal, seeks: a true connection, a real love, a reason to cherish existence. Brielle had climbed into the wrong carriage to escape the storm. The Vampire King had said, "Stay," and she had stayed, and they had lived happily ever after for centuries upon centuries, in love and in power, until the very concept of endings became meaningless. Because some love stories don't end. Some love stories are just beginning, and theirs was eternal.